Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever in the US you happen to be. My name is Carmen Mazzara, and I serve as Executive Director of APSIA, the Association of Professional Schools of International Affairs. We're delighted to welcome all of you here today from all across the United States to learn a little bit more about the US Foreign Service Internship Program. Marty Estelle is currently a Senior Advisor at the State Department, but has worn many hats at the department over the years, and I'm sure she'd be happy to talk with you about her experience as an FSO as well, and particularly how you can bring opportunities like the USFSIP to your students and to your schools. I do want to note, as Marty will say as well, that she is not here in her official capacity, but we are able to record this presentation and we'll have it later for you through the APSIA YouTube page. We are so pleased, as always, to support the advisors as you try to bring these questions to your campuses. And we look forward to welcoming you to many other APSIA webinars going forward. And with that, Marty, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carmen. And thank you to all of you for chiming in. As Carmen said, I'm not here in my official capacity as a senior advisor to the program. I am here in my personal capacity as a passionate advocate for lengthening the pipeline and filling the pipeline of diversity through to global affairs, which is something I feel very passionate about. I was a foreign service officer, a diplomat for 30 years, served mostly in Latin America, did do a stint in Southeast Asia, started out in Malaysia and Indonesia, but spent most of my time in Latin America, Honduras, Ecuador, El Salvador, did a stint in Spain, spent way too much time in Washington. But part of the job that I did in Washington was I was the head of recruitment. So when I retired, they do sometimes let us come back as rehired annuitants. And I told them that if I was ever going to come back, it would be to support the US Foreign Service Internship Program. But at first, I was happily flying all over the world, having a wonderful time as a retired person, traveling and visiting and mooching off of all of the friends that I had developed around the globe until I was grounded by COVID and not able to travel anywhere. So when they called me back and they said, hey, we really need somebody, the person who is running this program is moving on, and you already know all about it and you love it, so come and work for us. I said, sure, because there's really no program that I feel more strongly about in increasing the pipeline for diversity at the Department of State than this program. So I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to kind of lay it out for you. Some caveats to kind of begin. We do have, and I'm sure you're well aware being advisors, a whole network of diplomats and residents throughout the country. You can find out where they are on careers.state.gov and look at the map and find out where the diplomat residence that covers your part of the world. They're only 13, so they're not in every campus and they're not every place they should be. But there is somebody who covers Hawaii and loves any excuse to have to go out there, and Alaska and all 50 of the states, and even Puerto Rico, though I doubt we've physically been in Puerto Rico for a long time. So those are your really primary official points of contact for any questions that you have about career opportunities at the Department of State for your students. Careers.state.gov has a lot of information on it and is a really excellent source for finding out about all sorts of opportunities. So I really would, I underscore that as being the ultimate source of information. The the U.S. Foreign Service Internship Program began in 2014 as the first, and up to this point, really only paid internship opportunity at the undergraduate level. There is the Pathways internship, and we can talk more about what that means, but the USFSIP is a paid internship program of a 2-year summer commitment. They spend the first summer in Washington and the second summer assigned to an embassy or a consulate overseas. The idea is it's very much patterned on our Foreign Affairs Fellowship Program. And it's really meant to be kind of a pipeline to the Pickering and Rangel Payne triumphant of Foreign Affairs Fellowship graduate programs. As you can well imagine, it's virtual this year, which is unfortunate for the kids who are hoping to come to Washington. I am very hopeful that by the time they're ready to go overseas next summer, we'll have figured out how to do that. But it also comes with, the idea is in order to have the participation of the group that we're targeting, which are underrepresented youth, underrepresented communities in what is traditionally the Foreign Service, that we need to figure out how to cover that economic gap. And that's what this program is designed to do. So the students get paid for the time they're in Washington or overseas, their housing is provided and transportation is supported. So the idea is for economics not to be a barrier. The qualifications and the criteria for the program are pretty competitive, as you can well imagine, when we're offering the only paid internship program in the US Department of State. It's very similar on the economic needs side as to what you probably are aware of on the Gilman program. So we're looking for that kind of a student that's Pell Grant qualified. Academically with a 3.2 or above average. So the grade point average for this program is higher than it is for the standard State Department program. Wide range, as always, of things that they're studying. We have a place at the Department of State for every academic curriculum that you can think of, from, you know, astronomy to zoology. So, you know, we take just about anybody. And so the idea is to provide this opportunity that has, in the first summer, in addition to the internship, we do a 3-week orientation program of professional training and academic training. And then in the year in between, they're expected to take the FSOT. So there's a little bit of mentoring on how to take that Foreign Service Officer test. And there's mentoring throughout the whole program. Right now, we have about 130 alumni. Part of what I'm trying to do is figure out how to connect the alumni to become mentors for the ones that are coming through. Our application process is at a horrible time. It's at the end of August, beginning of September. We do that in order to do our selection and to get things working so that the students can get their applications in for security clearance in time for the following summer. They do need to be eligible to get a security clearance, and that is a big plus, at least in the Washington area, to have that clearance when you're looking for jobs afterwards, because it does last throughout the internship. So one of the things, and one of the reasons why I wanted to talk with you all today, is it's really something they need to start thinking about more or less now, if this is something that they're interested in. The application will become available at the end of August, beginning of September on usajobs.gov, that wonderful website of how to apply for federal opportunities. And you really don't want to wait for that job, for the announcement for the internship to come out, to start setting up your profile, figuring out how to make things work on USA Jobs. You want to do that now. You want to take the summer to start thinking about how to put a resume together, because that's going to be required. You're going to have to write an essay as to why you want this internship. So you want to start thinking about writing that. And I think now is a good time for people who might be interested in the program to start thinking about it, so that when the opportunity is announced at the end of August, they're ready to jump onto USA Jobs. They've got their resume already in that silly format that has to be in there, and they're ready to go. I'm going to stop there because I think it'd be more interesting to kind of see what kinds of questions you had and what things you were interested in talking about.
Thanks, Marty. I invite all of you, you know how Zoom works. If you feel comfortable, put it in the chat. If you feel comfortable, raise your hand. We're happy to skip for there. Michael, please.
So greetings from Scottsdale, Arizona. So I've been teaching in the Marks School of Public and International Affairs at Baruch College for 16 years. And all of my students, whether graduate or undergraduate, are doing internships. So I'm talking about, I don't know, 700 or 800 students altogether. I've had both graduate students and undergraduates who have applied for State Department internships. On the graduate side, I had one who did it so far in advance that she actually got her security clearance by the time our program in Washington started, when she moved to Washington. I've had 3 or 4 others since then who never got their clearance, even though they got a preliminary acceptance. One of them, a year later, for the Pathways program, got a last minute, you need to show up in Los Angeles next Monday and you can join the State Department. And she's now still working at the State Department. Had an undergraduate student last semester who interned with the Central American Strategy Group that's based in DC. She did that online. And she was originally told she would then, in the spring semester, originally was supposed to move to Barcelona to the consulate. And of course, that wasn't happening. But as of last week, apparently she needed, so this is all about the process, you know, and my frustration with it. As of last week, I finally organized an internship with her at the United Nations Global Compact, where I have some connections, because she still had not received her second security clearance, having been cleared already for the fall semester. So I think it's, and I also, I'll mention, have my first student who applied for, actually that student was a finalist for the Rangel Fellowship, did not get it. I have another student originally from Haiti who did get the Rangel Fellowship and has now been accepted at, I don't know, 8 or 10 graduate schools, and he'll be starting. So my frustration and my hope is to find a way to get kids through the security clearance process in a timely fashion. I mean, the graduate students, and then I'll be quiet, we have a program where they move to DC for the fall semester. And in several years, the last week of August, before they moved, I ended up having to find an alternative internship because they still hadn't gotten their clearance. So what's the solution if there is one? Thank you.
I hear this all the time. And it's something that we bring up all the time as well. We understand how much of a burden it is and how much of an impediment it is. One of the reasons why our programs are advertised and competed and everything is done so far in advance. We do the summer program in the October before, is exactly for that security clearance. And we keep trying to find the absolute sweet spot of when to put in hundreds of student requests for security clearances. Not all of the internships have the same security level. Some of them have a lower security level and are easier to get, which might explain why you got cleared for this one, but then you had to get the next one and you didn't have time to get cleared for that one, because it's a different level that they're looking for depending on where it is that you're working. So part of it is to get the students in the mindset of they need to do this far in advance. They need to put their paperwork in as quickly and as thoroughly as possible, so there's less of a chance for some sort of hiccup and more of a time to fix that hiccup. Over the pandemic issue, you can imagine how wacky it's been for us as it's been for everybody across the spectrum. And that includes the people who do the security clearances, trying to figure out how do we do what we used to do in person? How do we make that work when we had, and just the number of people that have the same issues that everybody else does, of kids at home and parents that are ill and having to deal with all the issues, that everybody's dealing with. So the State Department is well aware of the impediment. There is not a week that goes by that somebody's not calling up and asking about this, that, or the other, or what can we do to make it better. They are talking about piloting a new system, which I'll be very anxious to see whether it helps in order to just get the paperwork through in a more timely fashion. But it is beyond the financial issue. I would say the security clearance is by far the biggest issue. I will also tell you that when we don't provide high-level security clearances, we also get complaints because for the unpaid program, because they end up, before there used to be that kind of benefit of, all right, you're going to work for the summer, you're not going to get paid. You're going to work for the fall semester, you're not going to get paid, but you're going to have a security clearance that can be revalidated by somebody else for the next 2 years. When we stopped doing that, we got complaints too.
Marty, I have a question to build on something that Michael mentioned, which is, he mentioned one of his students who'd been in Haiti. And one of the things that I encounter is a lot of first-gen students whose parents came from somewhere else or whose grandparents still live somewhere else. And the ability to talk about that in their application, in addition to the complicating factors for the security clearance. Do you have advice for how students can celebrate that as well as do it in a way that doesn't completely undermine their argument that they are committed to being a US government representative?
I don't think I think they're really two sides of the house that don't necessarily talk to each other or impact on each other. When we read that in an application, we never think of the possibility of dual interests from a security viewpoint. There's a whole another part of the department that looks at that, kind of thing. That's not those of us who are interested in bringing interns into the department. They usually have fabulous stories. They can talk about their cultural adaptability. They're passionate about the United States because their family worked so hard to get here. They usually make fabulous applicants, and particularly if they've strived for academic excellence and they've beaten back all of those barriers and they've come out on top. They're excellent candidates. They are very difficult at times security applicants, and if it were up to diplomatic security, we would all be living in our basements and never went anywhere and never did anything, and would be easy to check exactly where everybody comes from. We know that's not realistic. We know that's not possible. So that's one of the reasons, particularly when you know that you have a challenging case, get it up there right up in front, get your paperwork in as soon as possible, fill out all the questions. And if you have a question, go back and verify, don't assume you know the answer. That with the awareness of that security clearance is going to take a little bit longer because there are that many more pathways that an investigator has to go through. They have their method, and it says that if you have A, I have to do B, C, and D. If you've got F, then I have to do G, H, I. And so there are pathways that they have to follow and boxes that they have to check and questions that they have to answer that admittedly are more complicated if you've traveled abroad or if you have relatives that live in a foreign country. Not impossible, but more complicated.
To expand on that, and again, I invite everybody. Oh, Patty, please, go ahead.
Well, Carmen, I'm just glad you brought that up because here in Hawaii, we do have a population of an immigrant population, and many of our students, especially particularly our undergraduates, are first generation in the United States, born here, and very passionate about serving their country. And yet, I am a child of grandparents and parents who went through World War II and internment. So it is a question that comes up for us a lot in getting security clearance and having to prove your loyalty or having your loyalty questioned because you are the child of an immigrant. So I'm glad you brought that up, because we did have a student who is first generation who had applied for security clearance. We have the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies here, and he was up for an internship, had been nominally accepted, and his security clearance took forever. And he had to delay his internship because it took over a year to get his security clearance. And our only thought was that he was a child of immigrant parents, and he was first generation in Hawaii.
Patty, I'll tell you, and this was 30 years ago, more than 30 years ago. I didn't get my security clearance for my State Department internship. And I didn't find out about it until 2 weeks before I was supposed to come to Washington. And like Michael, I had people scurrying around Washington to find me an internship. And why? Because my daddy was in the military and I spent a lot of time overseas. And it was, you know, that happens. The areas in which we run into difficulty, to be quite honest, in the difficult to get a security clearance, isn't so much where you've come from or how far you've traveled. That just takes time, and somebody has to go through the process, and that takes time. The problem we run into are drug use, alcohol abuse, sexual harassment, and those are things that are either lied about and found out about later, which is not a good thing, or they're not brought up and they're found out about in the investigation. For example, drug use. Most of the investigators know that the kids that they're going to be talking to have probably at some time in their life experimented with drugs or had a drink. So don't try to hide that. Now, when they ask you, when was the last time, that answer should be several years ago and not 20 minutes before we had this interview. So I really do think that those are the issues that impede an actual security clearance more than the time that's required to do a thorough investigation when we have complicated applicants. I really do.
Marty, to pivot a little away from the clearance question, you talked a little bit about what you're looking for in the essays themselves. Can you tell us a little bit more about the process and the kinds of questions students usually have to answer, and what you as an evaluator want to see in a kid when they come before you to compete for this?
This is my first season of having to go through the application process. I'm going to totally revamp it. I really want to look at it. I've been looking at how the Gilman does theirs and how the critical language does theirs, and I think there are ways that we can tweak it so that it's not quite so cumbersome and that we still get the high quality candidates that we want. So there will still probably and always be a writing section, and what we want from that is we want writers. We want people who can articulate their ideas in writing. That's very important for work at the State Department, whether you're foreign service or civil service. So we want people who can write. We're looking for that story. We're looking for that example of what you bring to the table that's your unique perspective. And that's where the first generation, diverse background, different perspective, that's where that comes in, and that makes them very attractive and very interesting. What perspective are you bringing to the table? For the U.S. Foreign Service Internship Program, that is a small group that we put through our own evaluation, and we do our own criteria, and we select the 40 kids that are going to do that out of the 743 applications that we had last year. For the overall State Department internship program, that is fielded out to the offices throughout the department. The kids get an opportunity to say which offices they're interested in, and then they get a chunk of these applications on their desk. And I've done that several times. And as I'm reading through this ridiculous application, which is way too long, and I'm trying to figure out which of the students would I be most interested in, what I'm usually struck by is the students spend a lot of time talking about why this is so important for them, which is great. You know, this would be great for my curriculum. This would be great for my resume. But as a hiring manager, I want to know what's in it for me. So tell me what you bring to the table. Write about what your skill set is, what your experience is, and then connect the dots for me and give me the so what. Why should I care? But first of all, write with capitalization and punctuation and syntax that shows that you have put time and effort and you've got writing skills, because writing skills are extremely important in the Foreign Service and in State Department in general.
I'm sure the faculty who are on the line very much agree with you about the need for complete sentences and punctuation. I also can say, as someone who sat on some other committees, not this one, evaluators only know what your students tell them. So if the student has this tremendous background or this tremendous experience or comes from a distinct perspective, the only way you know is when the student shares that in their materials. And sometimes you'll see things in a letter of recommendation and you say, why didn't the kid tell me that? I had no idea that this was something they had done, had accomplished, a distinct perspective that they could bring into the work. So the more you can encourage your students to actually say the things that they assume we're going to know, the better. And that, I think, particularly comes with students who come from a diverse background or who have demonstrated a great deal of resilience in overcoming particular challenges. Because if I don't know, I don't know. And I can't Google you to find out all about you. One of the other questions that I often get, and again, I encourage folks to raise their hands or throw things in the chat, is about students who are not from the greater Beltway area and who are concerned about going so far from home, being in a new place, the distinct culture that is DC. Is there advice you would give advisors to share with those students, or are there ways that you all make the landing a little softer for students?
That's a good question. I do a lot of mentoring on people who say, I want to come to DC. They're usually already graduated, they're in the job search. One of the things that I love about the USFSIP is they come as a cohort and they come from all over the country and they have absolutely nothing in common except for the fact that they've got this program, and they become tight. They really develop a cohort that I'm trying to figure out, how can we keep that energy going well beyond the time that they're in the program, because we don't usually hire off of undergraduate campuses. It's just the reality. We need a way to maintain that connection, that they feel like they're still part of us. And there's a lot of cross cohort mentoring that I think can go on. Washington's a tough town. It's a tough town to come into. It's expensive. It's competitive. You've got a place where there's all sorts of kids who are just as bright and capable as you are. And some of them have come from a much wealthier background and have a level of support that allows them to take that unpaid internship or allows them to take that underpaid entry-level job that, oh, by the way, they want a master's degree for. It's just the reality of the situation. Washington is a networking town. More than any place and more than anything, it's networking. So get over your inability to walk up, shake somebody's hand, introduce yourself, and start trying to find those connections. Being willing to say, well, what you do sounds really interesting. Can I find a time to maybe have a cup of coffee and talk to you a little bit more about what you do? Not the direct, I want a job, but the kind of networking of finding out what the opportunities are and using your time in Washington to kind of explore those opportunities. I tell all of the interns when I have a chance to talk to them, back in the day when we had in-person internships, you've got an all-access pass to the US Department of State. get your day job done, because that's what you've been hired to do. That's what you've been brought on board. And then get out there. You've got and talk to the people that you should be talking to. Tell your boss that you want to take an hour in the afternoon and go to that Brookings Institute lecture. Oh, and by the way, you'll come back and give a briefing to the rest of the office about what they should know from that presentation. So this is a real opportunity to network, because at the end of the day, that's where it's all going to come from. And that may not be the way that it should work. And maybe that'll be one day it won't work that way. And everybody will just be accepted on their merits. But in the meantime, they need to come here and with that idea of that's what the culture is. And not only that's what the culture is, but confident in their ability to do it and to be good at it and be outside of their comfort zone. If you want to be a foreign service officer, you better get used to spending a lot of time outside of your comfort zone.
And that's some great ideas for programming too, that campuses can do to help students practice that before they get thrown into the deep end on C Street and in the halls.
It's a skill. It's a skill that can be learned like any other skill of how to network and how to engage. And some people do it more easily than others. But one of the interns that we had last summer was from Florida. She'd never been out of the state of Florida before. She'd never been on an airplane. She came up to Washington. She was totally intimidated, sure that she was, way not up to the caliber of all the other young people that she was with. And by the end of the summer, she was briefing an ambassador level person on what she had done for the summer with such a level of confidence. And she was so articulate and spot on because she had developed that confidence of, hey, yeah, these kids don't know any more than I do. They're no better at what they're doing than what I'm doing. I can do this. And I think that's really the important part of developing that level of self-confidence and the skills behind it, but also just the moxie of, yeah, I can do that.
Can I jump in on that? Because it's near and dear to my heart, along with complete sentences. And I, other than that Patty is at the University of Hawaii, I'm not sure where other people are from, but Baruch College, for those who don't know, is one of the four-year campuses of the City University of New York. So Baruch has about 18,000 students, CUNY altogether, I don't know, 350,000. We are easily the most diverse student population anywhere. My colleague, Kafui Kwaku, is in Central CUNY office and responsible, among other things, and I'll let him speak for himself, for a great summer Washington program that CUNY has had for years, where we typically send 10 young people to DC, and the university covers their housing in dormitories at George Washington University, and they get a stipend. And I participate by helping to arrange internships. But it's my speech to kids is, because we're not an Ivy League school, we're a city university, is you can compete with any kid in any chair in any college or university, including Harvard, Yale, and Stanford. And we have the kids to prove it. And so it's great to hear you say this. And I hope the other folks on the call are doing that with their students, because it's, this is how we diversify. Because these kids, they're first generation, they're the translators for their parents. As you said, their parents don't have that network where they can pick up the phone and call someone in DC and say, my kid's coming down, can he stay with you for a while? So thank you for your approach and your attitude. It's appreciated.
And I will say that we have one of our diplomats in residence at City College in New York. So I hope that's well connected in there.
Do you have contact information, or I can look him up?
I could get everybody contact information, but it is at careers.state.gov under diplomats in residence. And there's
okay.
you click on the map and it'll tell you what it is. For example, the diplomat in residence at Hawaii is not part of the official recruitment. You have a ex-diplomat in residence in Hawaii, but it's not one of the recruiters. That's job it is to recruit for the State Department.
However, it is helpful because
it's very helpful. I wish we had them all over the country.
Because, you know, they've done talks for our students, and it's really interesting because here in Hawaii, we tend to have the attitude, and a lot of our students have the attitude, because we're such a small state, such a small island, that everything on the continental US is much better than they are. And so they grow up feeling a little inferior. And the truth of the matter is we have some very talented students. Sure. And I know that we had someone from the State Department talk to our students about just the whole testing process. And it was really interesting because when they talked about it, they go, you know, it's not whether you win or lose. It's how you go about gaining cooperation. And it was really interesting because I was explaining this to my son and he goes, oh yeah, it's kind of like a video game. And I go, what? And he says, yeah, if you win this one game, you're a bloody tyrant and you lose. And I'm like, oh, okay. That's really interesting. But I think it's really important for advisors to let their students know that they can compete. I have some really brilliant students. I have one student who actually is fluent in 2 languages. And I've had many go through our program like that, where they can speak 2 languages fluently. And, you know, we keep trying to explain to them, if you work for the State Department, you will not necessarily be posted in a country that you have a working knowledge of or that you're an expert in. But what you will have is a skill to learn a language and understanding maybe a little of economics and history and literature. And those things are important. And I thought one of the things that the State Department representative told my students is that a really good broad-based liberal education will be a wonderful tool for you. And I went, oh, okay, this is good. We do, in Asian studies, our students do build their own programs across disciplines, so they understand that. We have a new Masters of International Affairs program, and it has managed to attract a lot of foreign area officers who have no problem with security clearance, so that's not a problem. But interesting because it has attracted many of the foreign area officers to our program. So
I can imagine.
And our students being exposed to these graduate students actually is a good thing also. It gives them a different perspective, especially in Hawaii.
And the reality is that when you're talking about the Foreign Service, that broad-based knowledge is very important. But I also want to remind you, and like I said, more information on careers.state.gov. We also hire a whole slew of technical experts. And we have doctors and nurses and techs and engineers and even librarians and English teaching officers. So those people come on board with specific skill sets. I mean, we do like our doctors to be board certified. But a Foreign Service officer comes in with characteristics and basic skills, and then you're taught the skills that you need to be a successful negotiator or a successful public diplomacy officer or a successful reporting officer. So you do have to be willing to go. You may come in with a specific area that you're interested in, and then inevitably they'll send you someplace else because that's where they need you. So you do have to have that kind of flexibility and the curiosity of wanting to go to more than just the area that you're focused in.
I'm curious for our other advisors, Manuel and Beth and others, what you hear from students and what some of the obstacles are, whether they're mental or practical, that someone like Marty should be aware of as she tries to attract students like yours to the program?
I work for a African American university, HBCU, and to be honest, they tell me it is a white world. They don't have a chance. That's what they tell me. Washington, D.C. in general. They do try, and I have two students that have been, it is a very small university. And last year before COVID, I had two students accepted for Rangel. Okay, but overall, that's what they tell me if you ask me, and that's what I tell them. Yeah, they have no chance. They don't have the money. It is a very lengthy process. Yeah, sometimes they don't even understand it. We are talking about first-time college students in their families. You know, their families cannot help at all because they just don't know. I mean, it is a very complicated process to apply. I mean, I have read the applications. I have seen the process, and sometimes I think you have to be a lawyer to get through.
Can I ask what school you're from?
Bethune-Cookman University in Florida, Daytona Beach, Florida. Yeah. So that's what I can tell you. I mean, I am being very honest to you.
No, I appreciate that. And kudos if you got 2 Rangels out of the 30 that were selected that year out of your college. I mean, that is amazing.
But that is me and some other professors sitting with them, going through the application, coaching them how to go to the interview, what to say. I mean, it is painful, the process, and we do it for them. And we tell them, you know, realistically, you know, the chances to get us. It is not what you know, it is who you know in Washington, D.C. Basically.
The selection process, and I networking is very important in Washington, D.C. I'm not going to disavow that.
Oh, just look at Congress and all the other institutions in Washington, D.C.
But the Foreign Service Officer selection process, that is not a who you know. It is a perseverance process.
Oh, okay.
You can talk, you know, and I tell that to kids all the time. Hey, don't quit your day job. You know, this is a parallel process that you're going through. If you're at all interested, start the process, take the test, jump into the pool.
Right.
But it's going to take, even under the best of circumstances, a year to 18 months from the day you take the test, from the day you're offered a job.
So, yeah.
And the reality is we don't usually hire, except for the Pickering and Rangel, right off of college campuses. The average age is 30-something years old, 5 years of work experience, and a master's degree. None of that is required, but I think it's realistic for people to be aware of the pool they're swimming in and get their expectations leveled and realize how much work is going to be involved and how badly they want it. Yeah. When I was head of recruiting, I had a hard time getting on HBCU campuses. They would ask me, how many people did you hire last year? And I'd have to go through that spiel that you understand so well of, well, we're not actually offering a job, we're offering an opportunity to apply for a process that you can imagine how well when they had, you know, Wells Fargo sitting there with 50 slots set aside for their HBCU. I had the hardest time even getting in front of students because of that barrier of my kids won't get in. Well, your kids won't get in if you don't believe in your kids. Who the hell is going to believe in your kids?
Right.
And the work that you did and the work that your campus did is proof positive to me that never underestimate the power of investing in an individual student. That does not take the burden off of us trying to figure out how are we going to diversify the U.S. Foreign Service in the U.S. Department of State. That is something that we definitely need to work on and figure out a way to do. But one of the Pickering Rangel Payne Fellowships have been expanded to 60 kids, 60 students, huge expanse. The U.S. Foreign Service Internship Program has been doubled. We're now 40 kids from 20. I don't have Howard University behind me, however, to do all the paperwork that's involved for all the selection and getting people on board and paid, but that's okay. I mean, so these are minuscule opportunities when you talk about the numbers that we would like to have to come on board, but it's a start. And I cannot say strongly enough, you may not be competitive, but you know what? If you don't apply, you're certainly not competitive.
Right. Well, I know my students, it is a small university. So I take them when they are 17 years old, or right out of college, and then I see them walking away, going somewhere, right? So I get to know them very well.
And that's very important.
Right. And I am an immigrant myself, and you can hear my accent. So I understand the limitations, but also I understand that it is hard work. Through hard work, it is possible to get somewhere, okay? But usually what happens with my students is that when other opportunities, when they have other opportunities, then they are not there for the longest, wait a year, 2 years, 3 years to hear back. They don't have, these are very poor people, okay? They are pulling out student loans, okay, to pay for tuition, all right? So they just go for the first, second opportunity come their way, right? It is, for me, it is very hard to persuade them to keep on trying, go this way. It is not gonna be easy, but if you stay in the game, you may win.
No, right? I understand completely. And I know how, I can imagine how frustrating it is, how rewarding it is when it comes through.
Oh yeah.
How frustrating it can be. And that's one of the reasons why when I talk to students, I really focus on skill development, on the pathway, and the idea of you may not get in the first time you take the test, and that's okay. Very few of us did. But any job that they take at any point is going to be worth it because they have so much to learn. So focus on the skills. What do you learn when you are working part-time at Pizza Hut? Well, you learn all about customer service, and you look how to work on a team, and you learn how to do financial this, and you learn how to do, those are real skills. So forget about job titles. Focus on the skills, and then focus on telling the story behind those skills. Focus on what did you learn? How did you learn it? And why, as an employer, I should be impressed by that. What do you bring to the table? And as you're going through and you're thinking about the jobs that you want to do and where you want to go, focus on the skills you're developing. And then maybe, yeah, you may not be one of those 24-year-old wonders who got the Rangel and are a foreign service officer at the age of 20-something. You may be one of those people that we hire at 35 or 40 that's got 10 years of work experience behind you. And that's okay, because I will wait for your students to get ready. And I'm all for having somebody else develop it for us.
Yeah, we keep on trying.
I've seen some real success stories come out of untraditional backgrounds. And I just enough of them to give you hope that more of them are going to be coming along the way. We had one of our, we had one before that was a vet. So he was much older than the kids who usually are on an undergraduate campus. And this year I've got a woman who's come back to get her undergraduate degree, and she's going to be one of our interns. And she's much older than many of the kids that she's going to be working with. And that kind of mix, that kind of generational diversity, I think that adds a lot to the program. That's a lot to the program as well. But it's not easy.
Marty, it sounds like there's some good advice there too, as you think about the application process, to maybe build in questions that draw out some of those things that Manuel sees in his students, but are harder to put into the traditional boxes, that would let them showcase those skills or showcase those experiences in a great way. Wallace, please. You're on mute, sir.
Yeah, there we go. I'm working on it. It's only been a year, you know. So, but I was going to say that reference with respect to veterans experience, I think, is really important. There's a lot of people who gain some very useful and transferable experience, you know, when they're in the military. And it is, yeah, I think of my own father from years ago, who was like seriously in the military in World War II, wound up in foreign service after that. And those skills that I mean, yeah, the skills that these young people get is on such an accelerated basis because of the responsibilities that they have, that I do believe they're transferable into the programs that we're talking about here, and certainly into foreign service generally. So not only would I not discount, you know, military service, I would give like a, you know, additional little plus, you know, a couple of gold stars for that, because those are, you know, those are folks who've been actually doing real stuff, you know, for in some very, you know, the world that we live in right now, in some very difficult circumstances. So I just wanted to add that.
No, and when it comes to the whole ranking process for the foreign service selection process, there are points that are given for veteran service. So that is recognized. And of course, through the regular civil service federal employment process, there are points that are given there's preference that's given to veterans. Right. Veterans are also particularly good for the technical skills that they get. So when we're looking at security engineers, or we're looking for other specialists that we bring on board, IT, finance, they're very competitive. They're very competitive for those jobs.
There's also the fact, I don't want to belabor the point, but I don't know what the percentage is right now, but less than half of Americans even have a passport to this day. Okay. You know, so, and if they have a passport, they use it to go to the Bahamas, you know, or Cancun or something. Right. And so that, you know, many of the people we're talking about in the military have had like serious foreign experience. And there's, you know, having gone through that, you know, from childhood myself, there's no replacement for that, and no match for that in terms of what you can study and however many courses you might take in college here in the United States. So I don't know about the points process, and I'll leave that to your expertise, certainly. But to the extent that there's some subjective enhancement of applications that have that kind of experience, I think that's really important.
No, I agree with you. And I think the whole international exposure is very important, which is why I'm a super big fan of the Gilman and other scholarship programs that allow undergraduates and graduate students. If it were up to me, every American student would have to spend time outside of the borders. You never look at the United States the same way again when you look at it from outside and you have to explain it to other people. You never appreciate both the good and the bad at the same level again, if you know, until you've been outside and had to be in. I mean, I'm a study abroad casualty, you know, 1 year in France, and I decided, you know, why would I ever want to spend the rest of my adult life in the United States? How do I get somebody to pay me to do it? So I think it's a wonderful motivating factor. And I think they need to be exposed at younger ages in order for it to have an impact. I like it when I see community colleges that understand the importance of study abroad programs. I like it when I see engineering programs that say, yeah, maybe not for a whole year, but we have a program, you know, that all of our engineers have to participate in, or our biology majors. because there's not anything in the world today that doesn't have some sort of international implication. And if you're going to be competitive and you're going to be a success, you have to know how to work across those international lines. And so I think it's exceedingly important to have that exposure as early as you possibly can.
I mean, I absolutely agree, and I don't want to belabor the point, but I do think, again, I understand the points, that the process, but it's that intangible. I mean, I didn't go to school in the U.S. until the 5th grade, and that was transformative for me for my entire life. And so that's why I absolutely agree with you that students have to spend time outside of the American bubble to understand that there's a lot more world, than New York, LA, and Disneyland, right? So however you would do that, I think it's great. I think it's great what you're doing.
It's very important. But then the other aspect of it, and I've had this discussion before with other groups, is you can have an intercultural experience in the United States. You don't have to go, get on an airplane and exercise your passport in order to have an intercultural experience. When I was recruiting, I was talking to a student of Native American descent who was going to school in Chicago. And he said, I can't compete for any of these jobs. I've never been overseas. I'm never going to go overseas. And I said, you're Native American. You're in an urban school in Chicago. You have figured out how to be a success here, and you want to tell me you have no intercultural skills? So for them to realize that their own experiences meet the criteria that we're talking about, instead of dismissing the fact that, I couldn't possibly qualify. I think a lot of that helps and we need to do more of having people in positions that look like the people we're trying to recruit. I'm a firm believer in you got to see it to be it. And I know that's true from a point of view of being female. I assume it's true from a point of view of any ethnic or gender-based or whatever group you want to talk to. But the dismissal of the definition of what some of the skills that we're looking for, I spent a lot of time fighting that.
Friends, we're almost at time. Marty, one of the questions I was wondering is whether there was contact information or follow-up information that you would share with our colleagues here if they wanted to get in touch with you, particularly as you adapt the program to move forward.
If you wanna get in touch with me about I should type something in here, huh? About the program.
I have a question, if I may. Very short question.
Then I'd be glad to give my state.gov address, and you're more than welcome to contact me to talk about the internship for.
Yeah. Okay. Are languages still relevant? Languages, knowing other languages?
Language is relevant. And when you're going through the whole selection process particularly for hard languages, there are extra points that are given to that. So that can help on the whole, where are you on the register thing, which is not a one-time number. It floats with new people coming in, and you're constantly in competition with whoever's qualifying for the program. And so we really do appreciate languages. There are also a couple of programs where if you speak the language, you can go directly in, which I think are really good for recent graduates who think they might want to go in the Foreign Service. It's called the Consular Fellows, Spanish, Portuguese, Mandarin. There's one more language. And once again, careers.state.gov, and you can look under Consular Fellows. They go through a process that's pretty competitive, because basically you are serving and doing the work. Thank you. You're doing the work of a entry-level officer in one of our consular sections, and you're adjudicating visas, but you're also doing, citizen services and other things that we do in an entry-level job at an embassy. We want to bring in people that already have the language skills. though they learn that sometimes they have to top off those language skills. So Arabic, I think, might be another one of the languages that
there are a couple of, Marty, there are also, I'm sure you're familiar with them. I've had students who participated in the critical languages program.
Right.
Yeah.
A Bangladeshi student who did that, and then a year later became a Fulbright fellow after he spent the summer actually in India studying Bangla because the security was not good enough in Bangladesh to go back there. And then there's the, blanking on the name, it's a joint program with the German Bundestag.
Right.
That's the State Department does. And I've had several students who they moved to Germany for a year, study German, get experience in government and in internships in the private sector.
And there's also the Boren Scholarship.
Boren, right.
Which is another opportunity to go abroad. So and these are all great feeder programs into foreign service global careers. I mean, they're all, they build this, and not only the language skills, but the cross-cultural skills that you need to live abroad. So there, anything we can do to get people interested, and then figuring out ways to lower those barriers to entrance for these programs. I think is great. I will just kind of to end here. I've worked overseas. I spent the majority of my career overseas. I have seen the value of just showing up with a U.S. workforce that is diverse as the country we represent. Mm. And the message that we send when we do that in places that don't value diversity, or places that are going through their own social upheaval based on race or gender or ethnicity, and then they come to our consular section, or they come to a program at the U.S. Embassy, or they see what we represent, we don't have to say anything. All we have to do is show up, and we deliver by example a very powerful message. So I think that this diversity does have an intrinsic value. It's not just a nice thing to do. Mm-hmm. I think it's a very important thing to do. And it's not just the representational value, it's the different perspective. People with different backgrounds bring different perspectives. We have very complicated, difficult issues that we're trying to solve. We need the best and brightest minds. We need people to look at it upside down, sideways, and from all sorts of different directions in order to find the solutions to these problems. And we're only going to do that when we open ourselves up and to all different kinds of people from different backgrounds and different ideas. So I know it's tough. I know it's a hard sell. But I also know that when they hear it from you, I can do this, you should do this, why aren't you doing this? I want to see you do this. When they hear that from you, it means a lot, and it makes a difference in their lives. Just want to leave it there.
And on that wonderful note, thank you, Marty. Thank you to all of you. We at APSIA want to help make that road a little smoother for you, so you can make it a little smoother for your students. So we look forward to staying in touch with you and hopefully sharing even more insights on the many different ways that your students can engage in their local community and across the world. So thank you, Marty, again for all of your wisdom. I hope we will flood your inbox with fantastic applications from one side of the US all the way to Hawaii.
So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, Pat Eastern is standing invite. So we're gonna do this next one. We're coming out to you. And I really wanna thank all of you for being here. And I look forward to seeing you at future APSIA programs. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
There's a lot of links in the chat as well, so feel free to copy them out if it's useful. And if you don't capture something, I'm happy to send all of those again as makes sense.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you
very
much.
Thank you now. Bye-bye.
Bye.